Guys, it is currently 4 p.m. I woke up at like 10:30 and then I woke up again at like noon, and now I'm just getting up. So I suppose I've caught up on my sleep deficit for the past year. We don't have much time to get a full session in because I do want to go to this local Smash tournament that's happening at like 6-ish, 7 at Luxor in the esports arena they have there. I will probably go to the tournament and then I might come back here, play a very quick baby 1-2 session at MGM Grand, which is connected to where I'm staying because this is the signature at MGM. We will figure it out from there, but wish me luck in the tournament, wish me luck in poker. Hopefully we run better today than we did yesterday.
Super Smash Bros. Players, if you guys have not checked in yet, please check in on stage with me.
Alright guys, let's get through the Smash stuff quickly so that we can move on to the poker. I had to fight a high-level Zelda player named Ven for my first match, and he beat my ass 2-0. My next match was against a Sephiroth player who beat me game 1, I beat him game 2 to say f*** you back to him, and then he won game 3, eliminating me from the tournament and sending me back 0-2 in sets, which unfortunately is a very typical result for me. Anyways, moving on to the poker, I headed back to my hotel and walked over to MGM Grand, where they only host 1-2 no limit at the moment. Since it was late, I didn't want to have to commit to a full session, so this was just a session for me to kind of autopilot and have fun. I've only got one interesting hand from this session, but I definitely have to show you guys before we move on to 2-5. I buy in for 300, and within about an hour of playing, I pick up pocket 5s in the big blind. There's a limpet under the gun, and a raise to 12 from the low jack, and 3 players call before action is on me. Normally, it's kind of hard to set mine from the blinds since you're going to be out of position with the low pocket pair, and it's just really hard to get value, but with so many callers in the hand, and given that we're playing at 1-2 and I probably have more of an edge here, I decide I'm going to call here to hopefully flop a set. The limper folds, and we're going to a flop 5 ways, and it comes down 5-4 queen rainbow. We flop middle set, but unfortunately I am out of position and I absolutely just have to check here. Unfortunately, action checks through. We go to a turn card, which is another 5. We turn quads here. It's a dream situation except for the fact that no one's shown any real interest in the hand. I check again, not really expecting anyone to bet, to be honest, since a queen usually would bet on the flop. But the player in the low jack does put out a bet of 20. He was a very talkative recreational player who had a massive stack of 1,500 or so. It was pretty absurd to see a stack like that at a 1-2 game, but again, this game is uncapped, so he very easily could have just bought in for that much. I had seen him play hands like 8-4 suited before, so this was definitely a player who I could potentially get a lot of value from. Action folds to the button, who calls, and once action's back on me, I decide to just flat here. Raising would just look super strong, and my opponent's basically saying that he has like Queen X here, and I think a hand like that could definitely fold to a raise on this kind of board. The river comes down the deuce of hearts. It's a pretty blank card. No one should really have ace-3 here, and I decide to check once again for similar reasons as before, but looking back, I think betting small here to make it look like I'm trying to steal and potentially induce a raise from one of the other players would probably be the best option here. And if they do decide to call with just a weak queen, then I get some value here. It's hard to get value regardless, so I don't think I should worry too much about trying to conceal the strength of my hand. And unfortunately, the low jack now decides to slow down and check, and so does the button. I say quads and flip over my hand right away to show everyone, and the dealer calls out to the floor and says high hand. Now, I don't play here, so I don't know what the promotion is for this, and we don't really have promotions quite like these in the poker rooms at home. So I asked the dealer what the high hand promotion is, and he says I will get $50 for making quads here. But shortly after I give the floorman my ID, he comes back and not only gives me $50 in chips, but also a rack with $400 in chips, and says, take this while you're at it. I had to sign a paper in 2 spots, and one of them was marked first 5, so I asked the floorman what that is and why I'm getting $400, and it turns out that MGM Grand runs a promotion from 1 a.m. to 9 a.m. where the first 5 players to make quads get an extra $400 on top of the already existing $50. So by playing here for just about an hour, I make $450 without really having to do much, and it definitely makes up for the value I lost in the hand itself. I didn't get the chance to give my dealer a good tip since I didn't know I'd be receiving this bonus and he moved to a different table. So I asked the players around me what a standard tip in this situation would be, and the player to my left said somewhere around 7 to 10%. So I walk over to the table where my dealer, or the dealer from before, was currently at, and I just gave him 50, but let me know what you guys think is an appropriate tip in this situation. It's definitely not as standardized as like tipping in a restaurant or something, and everyone has a different opinion, so if you guys could argue in the comments, it would definitely boost the engagement for the channel, and I'd highly appreciate that.
Correct, yes.
Besides that, there weren't really many interesting hands from this 1-2 session. I played for about 3.5 hours and ended up cashing out for $650, which makes for a $350 profit, so pretty much all the profit was made from that quads hand and the bonus. Anyways, we're going to move on to more exciting stuff, which is 2-5, so let's get into it.
Alright guys, I don't feel like playing against a bunch of regs today. So for a change of scenery and to hopefully just have a little bit higher chance of booking a profit, I'm going to be playing at Bellagio today, walking there from Signature. Wish me luck.
Once I get to the Bellagio poker room, I get a seat right away in the 2-5 game. I buy in for the max, which is 500, and within about 10 minutes, I pick up ace 10 of diamonds and under the gun. I make it $15, and action folds to the player in the small blind, but he had bought the button this hand, so he makes the call. We are in position, going to a flop heads up, and it comes down deuce 7 king with 2 diamonds. Great flop for me overall. I've got the nut flush draw, and a board like this is just going to favor my range a ton of the time. I'm ready to put out a bet, but my opponent does it for me, leading out for $15 here. I make the easy call, no need to raise here because we're not getting him off of a king and I'm ahead of all his bluffs. The turn is a pretty good card, it's the ace of hearts, and that's definitely going to put us ahead here pretty much all the time. My opponent does not slow down though, and he now bets 50 into a pot of $60, so quite a big bet, and it only leaves him about 150 behind. He was playing fairly short stacked. I have a pretty straightforward call once again, and honestly, if the river comes a blank, I'm more than happy to call off almost any bet. I just don't see him playing any super strong hands this way. The river is the 7 of spades, and my opponent now bets about $50-ish. I don't know the exact amount, but it doesn't really matter. I make the straightforward call, and he shows pocket queens and is like, yeah, I was worried about the ace. Not sure what he was thinking in this hand, but sometimes we just win these easy pots. About 3 hours into the session, I pick up Jack 10 of clubs in the cutoff. The low jack opens to 15. He was a younger player and it didn't seem like a pro, but he hadn't done anything crazy and seemed to play pretty standard, so not sure what this player is like quite yet. Action folds to me and I decide to flat, and so does the big blind. So we are going 3 ways to a flop, which comes down 9 ace queen with 1 club. We've got an open-ended straight draw, one of them being to Broadway, and a backdoor flush draw. Besides that, not much else. The big blind checks. The initial raiser now decides to check, and I decide this is a spot where I can potentially steal the pot. I decide to bet $30 here, hoping that the low jack will at least fold since I expect him to be betting strong hands most of the time on this flop. And the big blind gets out of the way, but the initial raiser does indeed call. So we are now going to a turn card, which is the queen of hearts, putting a second queen on the board. My opponent checks to me again, and given that I don't improve or pick up equity, and given the fact that my opponent could very easily have queen x here, I decide to check as well. But looking back, maybe a bet is better. I do get like 9x to fold, maybe pocket 10s, pocket jacks, maybe even pocket kings, just given that I definitely could play ace x this way. Let me know what you guys think, but as played, we're going to a river card, which is the 8 of diamonds, giving me a straight. Feeling a lot more comfortable now, and my opponent decides to bet $50 this time, just around half pot. And I wanted to go for value against Queen X specifically, you know, King Queen, Queen Jack, something like that. And I look at his stack and see that he has around 340-ish total. And I think I make a big mistake here because I raise to 165, knowing full well and consciously thinking to myself that I would be in a really shitty spot if he shoved. And as you guys probably expect, he doesn't think too long before shoving for 338 total. I need to call 173 into a pot of 610 if I did the math correctly, and honestly, good price or not good price, this is an absolute fold. I don't want to spoil you guys on what my thought process is after this hand, but this is just the easiest fold. He never is bluffing here, and he just always has a boat. And I tanked for 1 to 2 minutes and asked him if he'd show if I folded. He doesn't answer at first, but says later that I'll show you either way, implying that he does have a strong hand. Anyways, I don't really look into that live tell that much. It was just part of the hand, and I was genuinely ready to fold. And then I thought to myself, kind of embarrassing to think this because it just sounds so stupid in hindsight, but I thought to myself that he could also have a straight and we could be chopping. But guess what, guys? He could also just definitely have a freaking boat and not a straight, because why the would he have a straight here? And ultimately, I called because I'm a station. I asked if he had a boat, and he nods and shows pocket nines for a flopped bottom set. Do you have a boat?
I got full house.
Nice. Nice hand. Yeah. Well played, sir. You got max value from me, and I had around 900 or so before the hand, was up a good amount. And after this terrible, terrible call, I was down to a stack of 530, which makes me pretty upstuck, unfortunately. I feel pretty frustrated with myself because I made a really bad call in the previous vlog at the win, and I feel like this was absolutely an easy fold as well, regardless of whether I have a straight or not, because my hand is essentially just a bluff catcher at this point. Unfortunate hand, but it was definitely my fault. I could have flatted the river bet or, just raised tiny because it would give me more of a reason to get away, but we're just going to have to move on and play better poker. Later on, I've got ace-jack of diamonds in the big blind. The low jack opens to 15, and I make the call. We are going to a flop heads up against who I consider to be a standard player so far. The flop comes down 9-10 king with 2 diamonds. Really good flop for my hand, actually. We've got the nut flush draw, an over, and a gut shot. I check to my opponent. He puts out a small bet of 10. I think I should absolutely be raising here. We can take the betting lead, and I've got all sorts of ways for my hand to improve, but I decide to just flat for some reason. The turn comes down the ace of clubs, which is pretty good, giving me top pair, decent kicker, and I check to my opponent again. He continues betting, making it 25 this time, so just around half pot, and I make the call once again. The river is a blank, it's a 4 of clubs, and I decided to lead for 65, and I know you guys are probably sick of me saying this, but I don't know what I was thinking. I don't remember what reasoning I had. I am only really getting called by better here. I'm not sure what I can't even put together what I could have been thinking at this point. My opponent calls pretty quickly, and he has ace-queen. And I'm just thinking to myself right now, like, what could I have possibly hoped to gain by leading on the river? I mean, he could have all the strong hands, and I can make an easy fold, of course, if he raises, but what am I even getting value from? Like, I am not getting called by a weak ace here, and probably not getting called by second pair or anything. Like, I genuinely just don't know what I was hoping to achieve here, and I'm just not playing well. I was now officially down in the session, which is definitely my own fault, and I play a few more hands before deciding that it's my last orbit, and end up cashing out for 305, which makes for a loss of 195 here. Alright guys, not the best session. I was playing pretty solidly and just winning small pots here and there that you guys didn't really get to see. And then I just started running kind of badly, and then I made a bad call on the hand where I had the straight. I definitely could have folded there, and I just I wanted to convince myself to call, as always. And then it just went downhill from there. So down about 200 today, Sag. And because of how few hands there were in this session and the previous one, I do want to combine this with the session coming up, which we only have one hand from. But first, I decided to get dinner at Nacho Daddy, which I know is a fan favorite in the vlog, and of course one of my favorite places to go in Vegas. I finish up dinner and go to bed to prepare for the last day of the trip. There we go. Today is the last full day of the poker trip, and I'm probably not even gonna stay here the full day because
One, there's another Smash tournament tomorrow back home, and I don't want to feel rushed to get back to it if I leave tomorrow. And two, I also just don't want to wake up before 11 a.m. tomorrow to check out because I don't wake up that early. That means I'm not really going to get to play a long session today because I have to drive home and I don't want to drive home super late. We are currently down about 1,200 on the trip. If I want to make this a winning Vegas trip, I'm going to have to make around 1,200 today in probably like 3-ish hours or so. So we're just going to have to run super well. Probably going to play at Bellagio again. After that, I'll be heading home. So wish me luck, guys.
Alright guys, one final hand from the last session of the trip. I was in for 500 but had 100 in my pocket in case I needed to top off, so 600 total. I was down about $100 at this point, and then I pick up Queen 9 of clubs in the cutoff, opening it up to $15. Both of the blinds call. We're going 3 ways to a flop in position, and it comes down to Ace Queen Deuce with 2 clubs. We've got middle pair and the second nut flush draw, so decent flop for my hand. Once my opponents check to me, I put out a small bet of 15, and the small blind folds and the big blind calls. The big blind was definitely recreational, and he seemed to be just a retired player who wants to play for fun. The turn is a pretty good card. It brings the 9 of hearts. We now improve to 2 pair and are ahead of pretty much any realistic ace. My opponent checks to me again, and I decide to go really big this time because I imagine my opponent is going to be pretty inelastic if he has top pair. I make it $65, and my opponent calls pretty quickly. The river is another good card because it is the 3 of clubs, improving us to a flush. And what's even better is that my opponent now leads for $50, which is a quarter pot, and this is just a very easy, common situation. This is what we call a blocker bet, ladies and gentlemen, and my opponent definitely has some kind of like ace X hand and is now feeling scared. We are definitely going to raise for value, even though he's probably not calling. I make it pretty small here, raising to 125, although I think a min raise honestly would just be the better option. My opponent doesn't take too long before folding, so we just play this hand fairly standard, fairly well. Obviously, decisions are much easier when I actually make hands, and I was pretty much card dead for the rest of the session. And despite this being the only major hand in the session, I did end up still losing about $100. Not the biggest loss, it was just due to multiple small pots and one hand where I kind of bluffed off like 100-ish bucks. So unfortunate that we couldn't bring it closer to even for this session, but it is what it is.
It is what it is.
It is what it is.
Alright guys, pretty uneventful session. There was only that one interesting hand, and then after that I was up like 150, lost a few small ones, and then I bluffed off like maybe 100 total in a hand where I defended ace-8 offsuit in the big blind. Flop 7-6 something, went check, turn jack. I bet small, he called with king-10 offsuit, and then river 10, I bet 55, he called again. Yeah, besides that, nothing really that interesting.
Let's get into the results of this trip. I only played 4 sessions during this trip, losing 3 out of 4 of them, and the MGM Grand session, of course, I only won because of the bonus. I played for around 15 hours and lost just about $1,300, so not the greatest trip. Definitely could have avoided hundreds of dollars of that loss if I had just made good folds. Given how I ran though, I was not going to make it out of Vegas with the win, and unfortunately, there were no chess matches to be found during this trip. I am now back in California, safe and sound, and we're gonna get back on the grind. So I hope you guys enjoyed this vlog, and I will see you in the next one. Peace.